Hey guys, today I'm back in Dream Car Builder and I wanted to try using an engine to power a plane. Now I know that doesn't sound too weird, but Dream Car Builder won't let you power anything but wheels with an engine. This means that to make it power a propeller, there's some glitchiness required. Now the guys in the Dream Car Builder Discord discovered and worked on this glitch, but I'm going to try recreating it based off a few short videos and the limited information I've seen on it. So let's get right into it. So I'm starting off in the sandbox, and the first thing I want to do is just get that glitch working, because before I get anything else built, I just want to make sure that my power source is at least done and I can rely on it. So I'm just building up a bit of a frame here, and originally I was just going to put the engine right behind the seat of the car, but they actually intersected each other, so I had to move it back a bit further. Easy enough to do this, just to build another triangle, brace it all together, and once I got that, you can see here, holding together fine. So I went back to the editor, I changed it to 2 kHz physics here, and I shouldn't need to do this for the glitch, but it's just sort of a nice thing to do, and I figured it may or may not have an impact. So I just put the engine in place and then fully upgraded it, and now what I'm putting in is a bunch of wood pieces. Now the hope is that the rotation of the wheels is going to make this assembly rotate, so after I just built it up, I just made sure to secure it to the rest of the frame so that it's not able to move in any direction, but it's still able to rotate, and then I put in 2 wheels. So after I did that, I was also going to put a wheel on the top and the bottom, but they were intersecting the wheels on the sides, so I ended up deciding to delete those, and instead just go with 2 wheels. Now, when I went for a simple test here after I just braced them all and then made sure to connect the transmissions, it didn't do anything special. That's exactly what I would expected it to do. And I kind of thought this might be the case, and what I would need to get this to work, at least I thought initially, was going to be some tension against the wheels. So to make this tension, I put in a bunch of rods to hopefully expand and push out the wheels, but when I did this, it made the wheels move to the sides, but didn't seem to do anything special. I mean, until at least it fell over, and then you can see it ended up starting to rotate here, but it's only rotating because it's rotating against the ground, which is an intended mechanic. It's not really the glitchiness, and that won't work in the air. So I just made sure to lift it up off the ground a bit more, and finally here I gave it another test, and I did start to get some rotation out of it, but it's only rotating, I think, because as I move the wheels to the sides, it moves the center of gravity and then makes it want to rotate. So I just told all the rods to expand in the same direction so that that wouldn't happen. And even once I did that though, nothing special really seemed to happen. I mean, there might have been a slight amount of rotation when I contracted them, but I couldn't really tell if that was meaningful in any way. So I also decided to strengthen the center rod like this, and I was hoping that this would make that effect that we saw earlier stronger, and it did seem to make it a bit more glitchy, but not in the way that I wanted it to. So I changed out the rods and put them so that they're pulling directly on the face of the wheels instead, but this again seemed to get nothing done. So I deleted the 2 wheels I had and just put in a single wheel like this. And I was hoping that if I just had a single wheel attached using only a single framing piece, that it would create a lot of glitchiness. Now here I just forgot to secure the back, so it just did this. So I just secured the back correctly, and this is more what I was talking about. It's sort of just getting suspended, and when it rotates, I was hoping it'd create a little bit of an imbalance, but nothing happened. So I couldn't help but think I was at least getting close to how it was supposed to work. So what I did is added on another one of these squares, and then I put some jets on the end of it. Now I wasn't hoping to power this using jets necessarily, but I wanted to try getting it started with jets, because I thought maybe it was some function of speed, and the faster it went, the more glitchy it got, or just something like that. So I got the jets to start spinning everything up, and it seemed to be pretty glitchy. But when I started rotating the wheel, it was like literally impossible to tell if anything was happening. So I decided to add in some paneling pieces and framing pieces like this, and what these are going to do is create a lot of air resistance and slow down my jet assembly, so that only if the wheel can add more energy into the system will it speed up. And here it was actually slowing down, so clearly whatever I had here wasn't working. Now my next thought was taking the gear ratio of the top gear and making it as small as possible, so I deleted those wings as well. And now when I shift up into the top gear, you can see something interesting happens. The entire assembly starts speeding up, well at least it appears to, and everything starts shaking up and down quite violently. And I was hoping that this meant that the glitch was actually taking effect and it was speeding up the part that had the jets. Now, again, it was impossible to see if anything was happening because I'd already sped up the entire thing with jets. So I deleted the jets and replaced them with just some framing pieces. And once I did this, once I shifted into the top gear, you can see that the framing assembly starts rotating, and it seems to be working. Now everything's incredibly glitchy right now. So I used some extra framing pieces to secure that shaft a bit better, and once I did that, it really seemed to be working. Now the wheel ended up still glitching out quite badly, so to hopefully fix that a bit, I deleted the parts that I had from earlier that I wasn't using, and the glitch still seemed to be working, but the wheel really got glitchy now. So I used an extra framing piece to secure the wheel, and also deleted all of the other gears but that top gear, since I only really needed that one speed. And once I got that, here in the slow-mo you can see it's almost rotating 1-to-1 with the speed of the wheel, so I was hoping this meant that it was going to work. And now with that done, I deleted everything and started working on final design. Now what I'm doing here is just basically working on the cockpit. Normally I don't actually model the entire thing so nicely right out of the gate, but I figured weight was going to be a big problem for this, so I wanted to make sure that my weight I had now was going to be very close to my final weight, so that later it wouldn't become a big problem when things just way too much. That was a lot of way. Anyway, now I'm bringing on the wings, and I just sort of go for a simple design here. Didn't entirely know exactly how I wanted to model it, and then I went back to the cockpit to just sort of come up with a basic system to hold that all in place. And once I got that, I also decided to double up the wings to give them a bit more strength. And then finally I finished up reinforcing them, and then added in the tail. Now, for the tail, I really didn't know what I was doing, so I just went for a weird design, and actually I ended up just giving up because I didn't entirely know what to do at the moment. So then I started going back to the wings, and then just putting in a bunch of cross braces to finish it up. And then finally I'm finishing up the tail here, and for that, I still didn't know what I was doing, so I just ended up putting on basically like a big boom on the end of the plane, and hopefully that was going to be good enough. So after I got that all done, I got it to a point where it looked okay. I figured I'd finish the modeling later, get it look nice. And when I went for a test here, everything seemed to hold together, so that was pretty good to be honest. And once I got that, I was really just concerned about getting the engine and the power source done. So I put the engine in the center of the plane to make sure to balance it, and then on the end of the wings what I'm doing is putting in 2 propellers. So I'm trying to make here is a VTOL. Now I wasn't sure if it was going to work, because I didn't know if I had the power to make this work, but I wanted to see if I could at least get close with the setup that I had. So basically I'm building exactly what I had before, but I'm just building it inside of the wing to hopefully make it a bit smaller. So now when I go for a test here, you can see as I begin to spin up the transmission, it makes the wheels spin, and it's a little chaotic, so I have to reinforce them a bit better. And once I do that, you can see here it ends up kind of rotating the pieces inside, but it's actually hard to see because I kind of hid them inside the wing a little bit too well. I was hoping to hide them so that only the blades would be visible, but it was kind of hard to tell if any rotation was actually occurring. So I just had to expand them up a little bit more with some rectangular prisms. And once I got that, they seemed to be working. So I just made sure to reinforce the wings a bit better using a few more framing pieces. And here when I go to spin it up, it sort of works. So now that I had rotation, I wanted to start working on the blades, and for that I'm just going for a very simple setup like this. There's far more efficient ways to make blades, and at some point I'll end up looking into it, but I just sort of like the way these look and easy enough to make these. So I made one side of the blade like this, and I actually had to make it on the other side as well. Normally it would just mirror straight over, but in this case it's mirroring to the other wing instead of the other side of the blade, so I just had to make sure to recreate it. And once I got everything in place, I made sure to decrease its weight to just 1 instead of 10 units per framing piece, and I started spinning it up. I only have 1 transmission hooked up at the moment, but you can see that it ends up rotating this blade pretty fast. And I added in the paneling pieces. Now as usual I need to add these in and turn up the lift coefficient so that they'd be able to push against the air and lift everything up. And I only have the one side hooked up at the moment still, but as you can see I can spin it up and it starts to lift up the one side of the plane. Now this was pretty good. It wasn't as much as I was expecting it to do, but I was hoping once I got both spinning it would make it work, and it just didn't. You can see here it's really getting nowhere and the blades aren't even spinning that fast. In fact, I ended up going back and trying up a bunch of different solutions, but none of them really seemed to get me anywhere. So I decided to kind of give up on the VTOL design and instead just work for a simple propeller plane and not overcomplicate things, so I'm just trying to get the engine working for the first time. So I go for a simple wing design and just had to make sure to brace it to the top of the aircraft. And finally I'm moving on the wheels and the rotational bits to the center of the plane instead of on the wings. So once I recreated that, just like I did in the earlier tests, I tried it out here and it immediately rotated the plane because the wheel's actually touching the ground. So I had to make sure to put some wheels in the front and then just a spike in the back to lift it up off the ground a bit better. And once I did that, I was getting a lot of glitchiness, just hoping that meant that it was going to work. And now that the engine was sort of working, I wanted to start working on the propeller. Now for this, it was sort of just making that square that I had originally that's connected to the wheel, and then just had to directly connect it to the entire rest of the engine. And once I got it basically positioned exactly where I want, I just messed with the cockpit a bit to make it look nicer, and then I braced it even better. So as the wheel spins up, you can see it also spins up where the propeller is going to sit. And now really all I had left to do is put in the propeller. So I'm just doing exactly what I did before. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's almost the exact same propeller design. So I just made sure to recreate that, and then I had to brace everything together, very similar way, put on the paneling pieces, and then increase the lift coefficient so that they'll be able to have some air resistance. And then finally I used some framing pieces to hold it all together. And once I got that, you can see here it's trying to rotate, but it just quite can't on the ground. So I moved on top of a building and tried it again, and you can see here it's sort of rotating the propeller blade, but it's not rotating it that fast, which is a little weird because it was just working better in the VTOL, and especially in my earlier tests it was working way better. So I increased the strength of all my components and it was working out better, but I had to go back to my previous recording to figure out what I did differently. And I ended up realizing that I had connected my wheel a little too well to the rest of the frame of my plane, and what I had to do was just weaken it a little bit, and counterintuitively weakening it was actually the move here and it made it perform better. So after I got that, I could spin up both wheels. You can see the propeller wants to rotate much faster. It's a lot harder to see when I'm falling off the building, but it was definitely really trying to rotate. And here you can see it's actually kind of forcing itself into ground to the amount it's trying to rotate. So this should work. I'm just adding back in the front wheels since for some reason I deleted them before. And once I did that, you can see the propeller is really rotating now. So that should work as a power source. And just to finish it off, I also put in some back wheels, and I was hoping to be able to move the plane forwards with this setup. Now, I wasn't entirely sure if the torque of the blade was going to make this thing just rotate to the side constantly, but it didn't seem to do that, and in fact, when I just turned on the propeller, it started to move forwards. Now, the back of the plane is not well secured, and the wing ended up folding in on itself, which didn't really help things. But after just a few modifications, it kind of took off. It was a little back heavy though. And now that I knew that everything was sort of working, I wanted to start getting the weight distribution a bit better. And once again, I put in a bunch of paneling pieces on the entire plane, just to make sure that the weight was kind of the way I wanted it to be. And finally, I started working on the back of the plane again, just built up a basic tail. I figured I'd need this in the future for sure, so I just put it in now. And I also increased the gear ratio a little bit on the engine to hopefully get a little bit less speed and a little bit more power, and this seemed to give me a few more miles an hour when I was on the ground, so I was hoping that that was a good sign. So I added some panels to the back of the plane like this, and these are just going to work as the tail. And now I'm adding in the control surfaces. So the first one I'm adding in is the one I usually add in, which is the pitch control, and I could do it using just 2 paneling pieces and a couple of rods. So I increased the tail of the plane a little bit too to give it a little bit more air resistance and hopefully keep it a little more straight. And I added some jets just temporarily to see how well it flew, and realized it flew very poorly. The weight distribution was very bad, and in this test specifically, you can see it just nosedives immediately. So I messed with the weight distribution a lot, and it's actually why now I need to put in a piece in the front of the plane to make it more front heavy. And after I did that, I also decreased the size of the front propeller. I wanted to see if that'd give me any more power, and it really seemed to work. Here I actually wasn't paying that much attention, and I took off and didn't even really realize it. So that test seemed to work out pretty well, and I wanted to move the engine. Normally what I do is just increase the weight of the whatever part of the plane I need to do to balance it out, but here increasing the weight isn't really an option because it can barely carry the weight it has now. So I had to move the engine further forwards, and once I did this, it could basically replace that front boom that I had put in place. And now that the plane was semi-working, I wanted to put in the roll control. Now for this I just need a rod and a couple of paneling pieces like this, and I just need to connect them together using a pyramid shape. And once I got that, I decided to throw myself off a building and see how well I flew. Now it was still very nose heavy, and that's why I was kind of going straight down, but I managed to somewhat correct it and just fly straight. So here I started to do a roll, and I was hoping to be able to turn and go back to where I came from, but what seemed to happen was that I rolled too far, and because of the way that the propeller is rotating, it made it impossible to roll back, and I ended up completely spinning out and almost losing control of the plane. I recaptured it just at the bottom here, but it was far too late and I just slammed into the ground. So I deleted the engine, and what I wanted to do was move it to the bottom of the plane, and moving it down isn't going to help me with any weight distribution, but what it was going to allow me to do was easily moving forwards and backwards since there's nothing to interfere with it. And after I did that, I get some good tests, but I was still very nose heavy, and I ended up just going straight down. So I corrected that just by moving the engine around a little bit, and I ended up getting some half-decent tests here. So I finished off just by paneling everything on the plane, and then making everything toothpaste colored. I didn't really intend for that, but that's the color I chose. And then I changed out some of the front panels where the pilot needs to look out with glass, and I set the glass to be black, which ended up making it perfectly clear. Someone told me that, I forget who. Thank you to whoever told me that. And then I set the propeller blades to have a gray color, or I guess more like an unpainted color. And once I did that, it sort of looked like a plane, so I sent myself off this massive canyon, turned on the propeller blade, and started moving. So initially things aren't great. The plane usually falls quite a bit before it can really start flying, but once I got in the air, you can see here, I'm right next to this ledge, that's going to be very important, and I fly to the other side of the canyon. Now, I half intended to run into it here. I was hoping to either scrape by it or run against it and kind of fling myself off of it. So that was half intentional. Smashing into it a second time was definitely unintentional though. But somehow I managed to save it before I smashed into the ground a third time, and I flew to the other side of the canyon. So if you look on the right here, this is the same little platform that I had saw before. So I managed to lose almost no height going all the way back and forwards, which meant that the propeller was probably doing something. And here I wanted to show off the plane, how it can actually turn kind of tightly. And I managed to turn around and landed almost back where I came from. So guys, thanks for watching. I just wanted to thank these 3 people on screen specifically again for finding this bug and perfecting it, and giving me some inspiration to do this video. So I just have a few last shots if you want to see them here. But otherwise, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe for more content like this, and until next time.